Itsuki is a worthless loser who is left with an empty bank account after his parents ran away with his life savings. However, everything changes when a rich family hires him to be their daughter's caretaker, but he cracks her instead. But before this, Itsuki is adapting to poverty like Mahoraga, and he has to do tedious construction work to pay his own high school tuition, because his parents are worthless gamblers. After work one day, Itsuki returns home and gets the shock of his life when he sees that his deadbeat parents have run away with his life savings. Having nothing but 2 coins in his name, Itsuki walks through the street, wondering how he'd survive the coming days. As 2 baddies walk past him, he notices that they're from Kyo Academy, one of the top 3 schools in Japan, but he ignores them because they're way out of his league and he feels that stands no chance of attending their school. However, he finds a student identity card on the floor belonging to one of the girls named Hinako, so he calls her attention to return it to her, but once she turns, he's completely caught off guard by her beauty. Suddenly, some masked men arrive and tie her up, but Itsuki tries to play Superman, so they abduct the broke moron as well. They soon arrive at an abandoned building, where Itsuki begs the hoodlums to release him since he has no one to pay the ransom, but they tell him to shut his pie hole, so he wonders why his life has suddenly turned into a Netflix horror movie. While scanning through Hinako's details, the abductors find out that she's the heiress of the prestigious Konohana family, which makes them celebrate that they've hit the jackpot. Itsuki is amazed that Hinako looks and acts like a real-life Disney princess, but she tells him that she has to go pee and starts threatening to spill her green juice on herself, so Itsuki informs their abductors. After she's done spilling her load, Hinako announces to everyone that she filled up the toilet, so they yell at her for giving unnecessary information. This makes Itsuki realize that she's not the Barbie girl he thought she was, but she makes things worse by pestering a bandit to get her tea and sweets, so he drops a bottle of water for her and tells Itsuki to look over the brat before angrily walking away. At this point, Itsuki starts questioning his life choices, but the airhead princess ends up spilling all the water on herself while drinking it, so Itsuki takes the bottle from her and calls her to move away from the puddle beside her. However, Princess Doodoo Brain ends up falling on her face, but her goofiness cracks Itsuki up, so he checks on her injured head and tells her to avoid touching it, to avoid getting bacteria on it. When Hinako asks why the abductors took him, he explains that she dropped her identity card and hands it back to her. However, she claims that help will soon arrive and asks for permission to take a nap on his lap. Itsuki is completely bamboozled because no girl has ever asked to rest on his lap before, but his tension drops when he notices how unserious Hinako looks, so he tells her to go ahead. While resting on his lap, Hinako asks Itsuki to tell her a lullaby, but he says he doesn't know any, so she requests a funny story instead, making him annoyed by how demanding she is. Minutes later, Itsuki is shocked to see that Hinako is sleeping calmly despite their situation, but he feels grateful to her for helping him calm down, so he wipes the drool off her face, causing her to wake up. However, a bandit angrily threatens Hinako's parents that he'd use her as a punching bag if they don't comply, so Itsuki promises to be her shield. Hinako admits that she likes being around Itsuki because he's very chill, unlike the numerous caretakers she's had, which allows her to be calm as well. After exchanging introductions, Hinako tries to grab his cheek, but suddenly, a can of tear gas is launched into the window, and a rescue squad marches in to take down the abductors. However, they end up arresting Itsuki as well, but Hinako explains to her maid, Shizune, that Itsuki isn't a kidnapper, so she orders the men to release him. As they prepare to return home, Hinako tells Shizune that she wants Itsuki, so she promises to make the arrangements, but Itsuki is completely baffled. During the ride home, Shizune does a background check on Itsuki and reads out his entire pitiful situation, including how he's owing tuition and rent, and this makes him realize just how cooked he is. However, Shizune offers him a way out of the trenches by asking him to become Hinako's caretaker, but she threatens to cut his ding-a-ling off if he tries anything freaky with her. They soon arrive at the Konohana family's mansion, and Itsuki is shocked by how large it is since it makes his home look like a doghouse. Once inside, Shizune takes Itsuki to a room where he meets Hinako's father, Kagen. Seeing that Hinako is comfortable around Itsuki, Kagen concludes that his daughter has found the caretaker she's been looking for, but Itsuki has no idea what a caretaker is, so he asks Shizune to show him. Using a television screen, they show Itsuki how perfectly Hinako acts around people in school, but she also acts lazy and dumb, like Patrick Starr when no one is around. And her last caretaker was so stressed out by this that she ended up in the hospital. After the video ends, Kagan explains that it's Hinako's caretaker's job to support her from the shadows and ensure that her lazy side isn't exposed to the world so that she'd find the best husband possible and save their family's brand. Hearing this, Itsuki agrees to be her caretaker for 20,000 yen a day, but Kagan tells him to start the next day because Hinako would get lost in her own house without a caretaker. After the meeting, Shizune takes Itsuki to his room, where she informs him that he'll be attending Kyo Academy with Hinako to do his duties and hands him the fake identity they created for him. Shizune notices that Itsuki is nervous, so she assures him that she'll be there to guide him on his caretaker duties. However, she hands him dozens of heavy books to study and informs him that he'll spend hours every day learning caretaker skills, which includes self-defense. Itsuki assures her that he's stronger than Saitama due to all the physical labor he's done, so she challenges him to a duel after his studies, but feels confident that he'll beat her. However, Shizune wipes the floor with the idiot in every single round, so he apologizes for underestimating her. Afterwards, Itsuki decides to get some sleep, but he sees Hinako on his bed, so he searches his caretaker manual to find a solution. To make things faster, he tries to ask ChatGPT for answers, but Hinako appears behind him and confiscates his phone, so he begs her to return it. However, Hinako says she won't return it if he keeps talking to her in a formal tone, so he switches back to using playful words with her, making her so happy that she falls asleep with a smile on her face. During the ride to school the next day, the pea-brained princess complains that she wants to go back home, so Shizune promises to take her back if she says the same thing in 8 hours. Shizune then reminds Itsuki that it's his first day on the job and warns him not to let anyone find out that he's Hinako's caretaker or that he lives with her. However, Hinako is still bothered by Itsuki's formal speech, so she tells Shizune to make him speak normally, and Shizune agrees to let him be friendly with her when they're alone. Hinako then asks Itsuki to hug him, and this makes him freak out, so Shizune explains to Hinako that ladies aren't meant to act like desperate hoes. However, Hinako tells Shizune that Itsuki smells nice, so she asks to have a sniff of his package after school. After they leave the car, Shizune hands Itsuki a loaded bag and asks him to use it if Hinako starts acting too troubling. As they walk to school together, Hinako complains that she wants to go home, so Itsuki reminds her that she's breaking character at school, but she points out that no one is watching them yet, making him realize that she has a form of spidey sense to detect people around. Shortly after, Itsuki introduces himself to the class, and the teacher sends him to his seat. After he takes his seat, the teacher kicks off class by announcing that they'd be studying the math behind Gojo's infinity, but Itsuki is shocked because it's a topic usually handled in third year. By the end of the first period, Itsuki is already mentally drained, but he's happy to see Hinako having cheerful conversations with her friends. Just then, two nice students in class approach Itsuki and introduce themselves as Kazuya and Karen. Karen explains that most of their students are ascended commoners who transferred from other high-level schools due to family circumstances, and asks Itsuki if he's one of them, so Itsuki follows Shizuku's earlier instructions and lies that he is. Kazuya explains that he and Karen are ascended commoners as well, and they've started a support group for students in the same boat, so Itsuki cheerfully agrees to join them. However, Kazuya coldly asks him to explain his relationship with Hinako since he saw them walking to school together that morning, but Itsuki lies that their parents are acquainted, so Kazuya laughs in relief. Karen explains to Itsuki that Hinako is the biggest celebrity in their school because she has the best grades and looks as gorgeous as Scarlett Johansson. During lunch, Itsuki meets Hinako on the roof, which is her usual hiding spot, and she asks him to eat with her. When Itsuki opens his bento box, he's shocked that it's stacked with elite food, but Hinako complains that it stops her from eating the delicious stuff sold at the cafeteria. Hinako then asks Itsuki to feed her, and this makes him flustered, but he still goes through with it, so she praises his efforts. To return the favor, she feeds him as well, and Itsuki is surprised that the omelet tastes better than Angela White's natural milk. Hinako then reveals that all her past caretakers didn't last up to a month with her before quitting, but Itsuki doesn't understand why they'd throw away a job with so many perks, so she reminds him that she's the biggest issue and asks him not to quit soon. After eating, Hinako falls asleep on Itsuki's lap, and he gets a call from Shizune, who asks about his school life so far, so he informs her that he was approached by Karen and Katsuya. Hearing this, she immediately rushes to check their details and informs Itsuki that Karen belongs to a family who owns one of the largest electronics stores in the country, while Katsuya's family owns an esteemed moving company. This makes Itsuki realize that they're both traitors. During English class, Hinako nails an assignment given to her by the teacher, so her friends follow her after class to glaze her while Itsuki watches from the corner. Shizune suddenly calls him and informs him that she found out through their tracking system that Hinako has lost her wallet. He asks her where the wallet is, but Shizune says it's somewhere in the west side of the building, so he realizes that it's in the ladies' bathroom. As he wonders how to retrieve it, he's approached by a blonde baddie named Mirei, who introduces herself as the heiress to the Tenroji group, but Itsuki sighs nonchalantly, so she scolds him for not worshipping her. Itsuki humbly admits that he has no idea what the Tenroji group is, so she explains that it's a mining conglomerate that's comparable in scale to the Konohana group, but his reaction makes her realize that he's familiar with the Konohana group, so she starts crashing out about how jealous she is of Hinako. After calming herself down, she asks Itsuki what was troubling him, so he tells her that one of his friends left their wallet in the bathroom. After handing it to him, she asks how he knew about the missing wallet in the bathroom, so he explains that the owner asked him to find it and decides not to mention Hinako's name to prevent further troubles. However, Mirei suddenly turns into a TikTok motivational speaker as she reminds him that attending the school makes him a leader and claims that serving others will stop his company from thriving, so he promises to be more careful. Mirei then advises him to fix his posture as well, since it builds confidence, and once he does, she stylishly walks away while telling him to seek her if he needs more help. However, all her aura points go down the drain when Itsuki points out that her hair is dyed, but she hides her embarrassment and lies that it's legit as she runs away. After school, Karen and Katsuya invited Itsuki for a welcoming party, but he refuses because he was asked to come home early and offers to join them some other time. When he arrives at the yard, he sees Hinako throwing rocks in the river, so he asks her to go home with him, but she refuses, so he tries to pick her up. However, Hinako stubbornly rolls on the ground to stop him, so Itsuki unsheathes the secret weapon Shizune gave him, which ends up being a pack of potato chips, and uses it to bait her into following him home. Following this, Itsuki spends the next few days doing caretaker training with Shizune. After self-defense class one day, Itsuki asks Shizune why Hinako's previous caretakers left early, so she explains that they were all chosen by Kagen and unable to form a connection to Hinako due to how strict they were. On his way to his room, Itsuki meets up with Hinako, who takes him to the bath in her room and asks him to have a bath with her. While in the pool together, Itsuki asks Hinako about her friends in school, but she says she doesn't have any friends because Itsuki is all she needs, so he thanks her. However, she suddenly asks him to wash her hair, but he resists until she informs him that Shizune usually does it. While washing her hair, Itsuki asks Hinako why she chose him to be her caretaker, so she explains that she likes him for always looking after her, despite her weird behaviors. Even though Itsuki isn't satisfied with her answer, he feels happy that someone trusts him. However, Hinako starts flashing her orange-sized milk factories, so Itsuki tries to resist his gooner urges until he notices Shizune giving him a death glare from the door, which makes him scared for his life. The next day in school, Itsuki bumps into a girl on his way to class, so he apologizes and tries to walk away. However, the girl recognizes him as Itsuki and hugs him to the ground, where she tearfully expresses how much she's missed him. Several days earlier, the students were playing tennis in the school gym, and one girl, Aura, farmed by playing like Prime Nadal, so Karen explained to Itsuki that she's Naraka from Class B, a beauty queen who's great at sports. However, Karen also explained that Naraka acts just as hot-headed as Bakugo because she's the heiress of the Miyakojima Yakuza family. Hearing this, Itsuki remembered the day Kagen warned him to avoid unnecessary interactions with the Miyakojima family heiress as much as he can. However, now in the present, Naraka is crying on top of Itsuki, expressing how much she misses him because, apparently, Itsuki spent some time in the Miyakojima family estate a long time ago. During Itsuki's midget years, his worthless parents did nothing but argue over trashy isekai animes, and they eventually came to the brink of divorce. So Itsuki's mom took him to stay with the family of his late grandmother, which was, of course, the Miyakojima family. On arriving there, Itsuki found out that his grandmother was disowned by her family, but his mom found her way back in. Soon after, he found Narika using Ichigo's Bankai on a poor training dummy, so he introduced himself, but she suddenly became Master Shifu as she gave him a pep talk, advising him not to stay weak. However, Narika then blushed while asking him to take care of her, and he ended up spending most of his time there by her side. Whenever Narika experienced any inconvenience like a cockroach or her dad yelling at her, she'd cry to Itsuki, and he'd comfort her by patting her head. One day, Narika admitted that Itsuki was strong, and also acknowledged her own weakness since she couldn't even go out by herself, but Itsuki didn't blame her because she was taught all her life that the outside world was dangerous. Narika brought up how she got envious of a girl walking alone by the street one day, so Itsuki invited her to see the outside world with him, and she graciously accepted. For the next several hours, Narika enjoyed the sights of the city which Itsuki showed her, and she eventually found a candy shop where she enjoyed a new treat. From that day on, Itsuki and Narika started sneaking out of the family estate to enjoy the city together, but eventually, Narika's father found out, so he accused Itsuki of putting his daughter in danger and kicked him and his mother back out on the street. As Itsuki was leaving, Narika tearfully promised him that she'd get stronger before her maid pulled her away. Back in the present, Itsuki tells an emotional Narika to calm down, but she informs him that she busted her legs while pouncing on him earlier. After taking her to the infirmary, Itsuki tries to leave, but Narika holds him back and begs him to stay. Itsuki apologizes for taking her out without permission back then, but Narika says it's fine, because it was her outdoors experiences with him that made her less of a coward. However, Narika explains that she still can't make friends because she'd spent her whole life training like a Saiyan due to her family tradition, and this makes people think they're a bunch of warmongers. She then confesses that she gets nervous around people and ends up scaring them during interactions, which is why they started calling her a delinquent. Narika begs Itsuki to help her, but he rushes outside to answer a call from Shizune, who orders him to get back to class to continue his caretaker duties for Hanako. After saying goodbye to Narika, Itsuki walks away, but Narika passionately asks if he plans to disappear again, so he smiles while assuring her that he won't. However, Narika demands that he pats her head like old times, so Itsuki pats her head and apologizes for leaving her before, but she says it's okay since they reunited. Suddenly, Hinako arrives and asks what the two of them were doing together, so Itsuki lies that he carried her there after she collapsed, but Hinako flips the script by bringing up how Itsuki was patting her head. To clear up the matter, Narika explains to her that Itsuki was her caretaker, who took care of her years ago, and she was excited to meet him because she owes him a lot. She then asks Itsuki to come over to her place so they can resume their relationship, but Hinako declines on his behalf and informs her that Itsuki is already under her family's employ. This confuses Narika, so Itsuki explains that he's her family's caretaker, but Narika refuses to accept it because she found him first. However, Hinako ignores her rants and leaves the room with Itsuki. While walking together, Itsuki asks Hinako why she told Narika about their relationship, which was meant to remain secret, but Hinako goes into goofy mode and says she only wanted to hammer it into her thick skull, making him realize that she was jealous. Hinako asks Itsuki whose caretaker he is, and after he chooses Hinako, she smiles and invites him to get yelled at by Shizune with get, making him fear that he's about to be fired. However, during the ride home, Shizune tells Itsuki that he won't be fired because it's Hinako's fault, and also because they didn't dig deep enough into his past to find the connection between him and Narika. Shizune assures Itsuki that she'll come up with an explanation he can give Narika, and asks him to talk to her to remain silent, so Itsuki promises to do so. However, the clingy princess interrupts their conversation by asking Itsuki to pat her head, so he makes her happy by giving her what she wants. The next day, Kazuya and Karen inform Itsuki that they're throwing a welcoming tea party for him at a nearby cafe and ask him to invite anyone he wants. The first person he asks is Hinako, and she immediately agrees to go with him, but he advises her to call Shizune for permission first, which she does. Afterwards, Itsuki meets up with Narika in the yard, but she starts whining like a jealous girlfriend about his relationship with Hinako, so he lies that he was adopted into the Konohana household as a live-in apprentice. When he asks her to keep it private, she immediately agrees, because she knows it would be complicated to explain, so he invites her to his tea party. This makes her excited, because it's her first tea party, but she's also worried about ruining the mood, so Itsuki assures her that she'll be fine. While running back to class, Itsuki runs into Mirai, but she starts ranting about Hinako again, so he asks if she hates her. Mirai explains that she doesn't hate her, but rather sees her as a rival, who's equally as beautiful and brilliant as she is, but somehow gets more attention than her. So Itsuki invites her for the tea party as well. During the tea party, Karen and Kazuya ask Itsuki if he's secretly Johnny Sins, since pulled 3 royal baddies within days of joining the academy, but he explains that it was all by chance. After the introductions, Narika tries to explain her and Itsuki's relationship to Karen and Katsuya, but her social anxiety takes over and makes them scared of her, so Itsuki explains her condition to them. This makes everyone more interested in Narika and ends up having normal conversations with her. During their chit-chat, Kazuya asks Itsuki about his family's customs, so Itsuki explains the 3 seconds rule using a cookie, which stirs up an even more cheerful conversation. After the tea party, Mirai praises Itsuki for improving his posture with a smile and leaves. However, Narika informs him that her parents are being held up by traffic, so he asks Shizune and Hinako for permission to walk her home. On the way, Narika starts ranting about Itsuki and Hinako again, and she asks him to come visit her after his apprenticeship, so he nonchalantly agrees. However, Narika complains that he's just being polite, so he giggles while walking ahead. The next day, after Itsuki concludes his dining etiquette training, Shizune compliments him for finally mastering the basics, but he asks how Hinako usually dines, so she explains that she takes meals in the dining room alone with servers. She then informs him that she's ramping up his duties, making him now responsible for watching over Hinako from the moment she wakes up to when she sleeps at night. A while later, Itsuki helps Hinako wash her hair in the bathroom, but when he's done, he resists the urge to join her in the showers because Shizune has set up a private bathing room for her, which no gooner is allowed in. After grabbing a basin, Hinako asks Itsuki what he and Narika were talking about while they were alone, and he says they were only talking about the new chapter of Hunter x Hunter, but Hinako mounts her milk factories on his arm and reminds him that she's first in line to taste his eggplant. Suddenly, Hinako collapses due to an overdose of Itsuki's Riz, making him scream desperately for help. Shortly after, Hinako is laid to rest in the bedroom, and Itsuki thanks Shizune for warning him earlier about Hinako's fainting spell. When he asks Shizune how she knew about it, she explains that it happens to Hinako regularly because the strain of acting like Sydney Sweeney all day puts her under stress. Itsuki is surprised that Shizune is so calm about it, but Shizune points out that it's no big deal because the fever will lessen in about 3 days. However, Itsuki suggests Hinako dropping the performance for her own mental health, but Shizune angrily explains to him that Hinako is keeping up the facade because it's her duty to the Konohana family. She then tells Itsuki to retire to his room and prepare for school the next day, but he's confused as to why he's going to school despite Hinako's condition, so Shizune assures him that she'll take care of Hinako and reminds him that his grades are slipping. The next day in class, Karen asks Itsuki why Hinako isn't in class, but Kazuya tells her that Hinako has gone for her usual business trip, making Itsuki realize that it's her cover story. However, Itsuki is bothered by the fact that nobody is concerned about Hinako or trying to help her when she's suffering. When he returns home, he asks Shizune about Hinako's condition, so she explains that Hinako is still resting and she'll be okay to resume school on Monday. He then asks if Kagen is coming to visit, but Shizune explains that Kagen is busy handling big boy matters as the head of the Konohana group, so he asks about Hinako's mother. However, Shizune reveals that Hinako's mother is dead, which makes Itsuki realize that he still doesn't know jack about Hinako, so he promises Shizune that he'll go plus ultra in their lessons that day. During the training, Itsuki wonders if he can become the person Hinako can lean on, and afterwards, he visits Hinako, who is now awake, so she thanks him for caring for her. He then offers to do a favor for her, so she asks him to hold her hand, and he fulfills her request. After minutes of hand-holding, Hinako falls asleep, so he tries to pet her head, but she suddenly calls him Papa. This makes Itsuki realize that what Hinako wants from her caretaker is a feeling of family, and he can relate to this since he never had any proper family of his own. When Shizune arrives, she calls Itsuki outside to discuss something important with him, but they notice that Hinako is gripping his hand tightly, so Shizune decides to tell him there. Shizune reveals that the main purpose of Hinako's facade is to bring a son-in-law to the family, because Hinako's older brother, Takuma, lives in a different estate and rarely sees Hinako. Normally, Takuma would have been the family's heir, but Kagen doesn't think he's worthy of becoming the leader of the Konohana group, so he wants the son-in-law to take that role and share his responsibilities with Hinako, which is why Hinako has to develop her social skills. Hearing this, Itsuki finally understands the burden Hinako is carrying, and he feels it wouldn't be easy to get close to someone like her. However, Shizune tells him to keep supporting Hinako while maintaining proper respect for his positions, so he promises Hinako that he'll do his best for her. The next Monday, Hinako returns to school, so Itsuki has lunch with her on the roof and forces her to eat her veggies. The following morning, Itsuki wakes Hinako up for school and informs her that he's already prepared her clothes, but she throws him a curveball by asking him to help her get changed, causing him to freak out. After calming down, Itsuki tries to keep little Johnny in his pants while helping her get changed, but Shizune suddenly arrives and informs him that he isn't meant to take Hinako's freaky requests seriously. To save his balls, Itsuki lies that he isn't doing anything weird with Hinako, so Shizune tells him that she trusts him just as much as Hinako does. The next day in school, Kazuya informs Itsuki that the midterm exams are coming up, making him realize that he's cooked. During lunch, Itsuki tells Hinako that the midterms are looking difficult, but she informs him that he'll be fired as caretaker if he fails the test and offers to teach him since she got the best grades in their class, so he agrees. A while later, Karen and Kazuya set up a study group in the form of a tea party with Itsuki and the girls, and Narika explains to everyone that she's good at history because of her family's obsession with warriors, but she's failing at other subjects. Hearing this, Mirai suggests splitting into groups of tutors and students, with her and Hinako serving as the tutors, so Itsuki agrees and reveals that his Achilles' heel is math. Before Hinako can suggest tutoring him, Mirai beats her to the punch, so Kazuya asks to be her student instead, causing her to stomp Itsuki's foot spitefully as she agrees. During the study session, Itsuki realizes that he's slowly becoming Einstein thanks to Mirai's teachings, but during their break, she asks him if he's really the heir to a business. When he asks why she's asking, she explains that his table manners looked like something he'd learnt within a short period of time, but she chooses not to pry any further, even though she has her suspicions of him. They soon return to their study group, where Karen brings up an annual social gathering, which the Konohana family is organizing that spring, and Hinako invites everyone to attend. Days later, the midterm exams begin, and Itsuki manages to scale through the first day. That night, Itsuki tries to study, but Hinako complains that she can't sleep, so he proposes having a stroll with her to make her exhausted for bed. Outside the mansion, Itsuki hands Hinako a candy bar and asks her not to come for the study group if it's wearing her out, but she says she's learnt from him that the easier route isn't always better, so they walk together back to Hinako's room. Several days later, Itsuki puts on a suit, which makes him look like a youth pastor, and Shizune tells him to be careful with it because it's more expensive than a Tesla Cybertruck. Afterwards, Shizune drives Itsuki and the sleeping beauty, Hinako, in the car and informs him that they be dining with some billionaires at one of Kagen's business sites so that he can experience the high society atmosphere. They soon arrive at their destination, and Itsuki's jaw drops to the floor because it's a replica of Drake's mansion rather than the small shed Shizune mentioned. Hinako informs him that she has to go greet some strangers, so he pats her on the head and assures her that he'll spoil her rotten once they get home. Inside the building, Hinako greets an oversized Hitler look-alike, and in response, he cheerfully points out how much she's grown into a fine woman in the past 7 years, so Kagen invites him and his associates to the dinner table. During the meal, the billionaire Peter Griffin is so dazzled by Hinako's elegance that he asks Kagen if she has a suitor. Once Kagen confirms that she doesn't, he offers one of his richest gooning bros as an option, and Kagen promises to consider it. Kagen then starts glazing Hinako's elite talents and behaviors, but she stuns everyone at the table by picking a piece of cake on the table and eating it while mentioning the 3-second rule. This makes the fatso immediately change his mind about Hinako, and Shizune tells Itsuki that the worst-case scenario just happened because Kagen isn't going to let this slide. After the meal, Kagen escorts the billionaire to his car and thanks him for joining them, but he tells Kagen to throw the entire marriage discussion in the trash because he doesn't want his reputation to get soiled. Once he drives away, Kagen angrily asks Shizune how Hinako learned such jungle behavior, but before she can think up a lie, Itsuki confesses that he taught it to her and apologizes. However, Kagen decides that his original opinion of caretakers being worthless was right all along and tells Shizune to teach Hinako how to maintain her facade 24/7. Shizune warns him that his request could roast Hinako's brain like a marshmallow, but he nonchalantly tells her to do whatever it takes to conquer the issue because it's Hinako's obligation to protect her family name. Hearing this, Itsuki realizes that Hinako's unmasked personality would disappear if Shizune carries out Kagen's orders, so he apologizes to Kagen once again for ruining the dinner and begs to find a better solution. However, Kagen says it's not his fault because Hinako has been unable to keep up with caretakers all this time, and he blames himself for allowing Hinako to be influenced by Itsuki. He then orders Shizune to give Itsuki his payment when they return home and tells Itsuki that he's fired. They soon return to the family mansion, where Kagen hands Itsuki a massive paycheck and tells him to pack all his things because they're filing the paperwork to remove him from the academy as well. After getting thrown out of the mansion, Itsuki gets so frustrated that he tries to throw his cash back inside, but he changes his mind when he remembers that his account balance is the same number as his meat size in inches and sadly walks away. Inside, Shizune meets up with Hinako and informs her that her dad has kicked Itsuki out of the mansion, so Hinako suggests other household roles they could hire him for. However, Shizune makes it clear that Kagen doesn't want to have Itsuki on his staff anymore and advises her against doing anything that would upset Kagen any further. Out of desperation, Hinako decides that she'll find Itsuki herself, but Shizune warns her not to and tells her that she's leaving a guard at the door to ensure she doesn't do anything reckless. Despite all of Shizune's warnings, Hinako waits until she leaves and then begins to Shawshank her way out of the mansion to see her hubby. In a street somewhere, Narika meets up with Itsuki, and he's surprised that she's walking around freely, so she explains that her dad granted her freedom after she surpassed him in all forms of martial arts, including cracking. After explaining his situation to Narika, Itsuki expresses his guilt for being the reason that Hinako would no longer be allowed to attend study groups again, and claims that street trash like him never belonged with Hinako in the first place. However, Narika says it's not true at all, because it was her experiences with him that made her open-minded and seek to gain freedom from her father, which is why she's eternally grateful to him. She claims that Hinako feels the same way since he's given her pleasant experiences as well, and advises to believe in himself more. Narika's passionate speech gives Itsuki a new wave of motivation, so he tells her that he's going to negotiate directly with the Konohana family. While running back to the mansion, Itsuki decides that he'll fulfill his promise to Hinako by being with her to support her, because no one else would. When he arrives at the gate, the guards try to stop him, but Itsuki suddenly becomes Bruce Lee and takes them down with swift kung fu moves before jumping over the fence. Shizune sees Itsuki running into the building from the control room, so she sends some more guards to stop him, but he uses the taijutsu moves he learnt from Narika to easily overpower them. However, he sees Hinako falling from her escape rope, so he rushes over and catches her like a superhero. To escape the guards, Itsuki runs away with her into the bushes, where Hinako advises him to use her as a hostage to blackmail her dad, but Itsuki assures her that he'll convince Kagen the right way. On the way to the mansion, Shizune and her army of guards surround them, but Hinako begs her to let her stay with Itsuki and promises to never drop her facade again if she agrees. However, Itsuki objects to the idea and explains to Hinako that he wants to be with her because he doesn't want her to push herself too hard anymore, so she holds his cheeks and tells him she trusts him. After a brief phone call with Kagen, Shizune asks both of them to wait there and cheerfully assures them that she's on Hinako's side. Afterwards, Shizune shows Kagen all the invites she prepared for Hinako's elite friends to attend their annual party, which would enable him to make crucial business connections. Kagen is surprised that Hinako was able to make such connections, but Shizune explains that it was only possible due to Itsuki's influence, so Kagen decides to rehire Itsuki. Days later, Itsuki meets up with his friends at the party and then thanks Kagen for giving him a second chance, but Kagen calls him for a private discussion outside. There, Kagen explains to Itsuki that he sees Hinako as a worthy heir to the Konohana business, and he wants her to be the one running things while her husband would handle appearances. After he leaves, Itsuki realizes that he'll never understand how Kagen thinks, but he decides to do his best at being Hinako's caretaker. Suddenly, Hinako arrives and thanks Itsuki for his kind words from earlier, so he pats her on the head. However, Hinako gets so flustered that her face turns to chili sauce, so she moves away to avoid his riz and wonders why butterflies are swarming in her tummy. The next morning, Itsuki wakes Hinako up for school, but he notices that she's drooling due to her Gunnar dreams, so he offers to clean it for her. However, Hinako gets embarrassed, so she asks for the handkerchief to clean it herself and chases him out of her room. While preparing to leave for school, Shizune asks Itsuki if he did anything to upset Hinako because she requested for him to stop their usual wake-up call. After explaining what happened, Itsuki asks Shizune if he's made her dislike him, but Shizune assures him that it isn't the case and promises to keep her eyes on things. However, Itsuki is still worried because he's noticed that Hinako has been acting weird ever since the party. At school, Itsuki is shocked to see the students gathered in the hallway, so he asks Karen what's going on, and she explains that the midterm results have been put up. Seeing that Hinako ranked first place again, Karen praises her, and all the other girls glaze her as well, apart from Mirei, who is drowning in jealousy. Itsuki congratulates her on coming in second, so she celebrates the fact that she's losing the gap between her and Hinako. When she asks Itsuki for his rank, he says he's not on the board because his score is below average, but she gets pissed off that his monkey brain couldn't improve after her lectures, so she scolds him. After calming herself down, she tells Itsuki to meet her after class because she's decided to continue tutoring him. Hours later, Itsuki asks Mirei if she really wants to tutor a bum like him, and she says she does because no one in her social circle has a grade as embarrassing as his. In addition, she points out that he has an inferiority complex about his place at the academy, so he praises her for being perceptive when it comes to other people. She claims that Itsuki would be able to engage more boldly with the world if he gains confidence, but Itsuki doubts that he could ever be as ballsy as her. However, Mirei assures him that he'll get there someday because he wears his feelings so plainly on his face and his attitude. Determined to help him even further, she asks if there's anything else troubling him, and Itsuki tells her about his etiquette problems, so she decides to tutor him on that as well. Later that evening, Itsuki tells Shizune about his new arrangement with Mirei and asks for permission to meet with her after school because he believes her lessons will make him a better caretaker for Hinako. Shizune permits him because she believes that Mirei would be a better etiquette teacher for him than her, and informs him that Kagen now wants him to expand the Konohana family's network of connections. Shortly after, Itsuki joins Hinako in the pool, but she's still feeling salty about his partnership with Mirei, so Itsuki mansplains that he's doing it to become a better caretaker for her. This makes her ease up, so Itsuki sits beside her and asks why she's been avoiding him lately, but she blushes and refuses to tell him. To break the ice, Itsuki offers to shampoo her hair and asks about her swimsuit, but this only makes her more embarrassed, so she yells at him to do it quickly. While washing her hair, Itsuki notices a piece of her stuck in her swimsuit, so he takes off her shoulder strap to pull it out. This makes her so flustered that she jumps away from him and calls him a creep, leaving him confused. The next day, Itsuki begins his after-school lessons with Mirei, but she stuns him by informing him that her goal is to make him rank within the top 50 within a month. During the lecture, Itsuki asks why she's so competitive with Hinako, so she assures him that there's no bad between them, and explains that she's trying to uphold the Tennoji family's standard by being number one. She then decides to switch to etiquette class, and Itsuki asks to start with table manners, so she spends the next few hours training him. Later that evening, Itsuki tries to take Hinako to her room, but she demands that he pats her head first, so he fulfills her request. During the process, Itsuki falls asleep, so Hinako checks his caretaker manual out of curiosity, and she's stunned by how detailed it is. When Shizune arrives, she sees that Itsuki has dozed off on the job, so she escorts Hinako to her room on his behalf. On arriving there, Hinako expresses her worries that Itsuki is only putting up with her odd requests because it's his job, but Shizune assures her that it isn't the case and says she's surprised that Hinako is asking her for advice for the first time. A week later, Mirai takes Itsuki to her family mansion to continue their lecture, but her father arrives and introduces himself to Itsuki as Masa before asking if he's secretly cracking his daughter. Mirai smacks some sense into the old fart and explains that they're only classmates, but he decides to join their table manners class to be sure. During the lecture, Masa teases Itsuki for being nervous around him, so Itsuki asks for advice on how to be less nervous. Masa advises him not to take failure to heart, but rather to hang tight to his convictions and act in accordance with him. Seeing that it's raining heavily outside, Masa invites Itsuki to spend the night at his mansion, so Itsuki calls Shizune to ask for permission. Shizune says it's alright since they have school the next day, but warns him that Hinako would be mad about it, so he gives a suggestion about how to mend things with her. Afterwards, Mirai takes him to the guest room and advises him to take a dip in their bath chamber. However, Itsuki's refreshing bath is interrupted when Mirai's mom arrives and introduces herself as Hana while thanking him for being kind to her daughter. She then tries to start small talk with him, but her exposed plots are affecting his brain function, so he begs her to leave the men's bath. Once Mirai finds out about their situation, she storms into the bathroom and scolds her mom for being a freaky cougar, but Hana flips the script by pointing out that she's the one who's wearing only a towel, causing her to scream from embarrassment. Later that night, Mirai serves Itsuki some tea and expresses her gratitude to him for helping her improve her social life and become more motivated. She then promises to hire him as her right hand if he scores above 10th in their upcoming exams, and he admits that he'd love it because he's enjoying the time they're spending together. This makes her so happy that she fantasizes about eating his whipped cream. The next morning, Itsuki leaves the Tennoji family mansion, but Masa informs Mirai that she has to get engaged soon, and she agrees because it would benefit the family. Upon returning to the Konohana mansion, Itsuki apologizes to Shizune for being absent the previous night, but Shizune says it's Hinako he has to worry about because she's pissed. Itsuki then visits Hinako in her room and explains that he had no choice but to stay at Mirai's house because it was raining heavily the previous night. This doesn't satisfy Hinako at all, so she sniffs him to see if he reeks of Mirai's cookie, and the idiot foolishly spills that he took a bath with Mirai and her mom. Hearing this, Hinako gets so swirled up inside that she grabs Itsuki's shirt and reminds him that his cucumber is her property, but Shizune interrupts to call her for dinner. While Hinako is at the dinner table, Itsuki arrives in a suit, which shocks her, as she assumes he's there to tie the knot with her. However, Itsuki explains that Shizune arranged for him to dine with her because he's finally made progress in learning table manners. Shizune adds that it's his final exams and she'll evaluate his skills by herself. As Itsuki eats the food, Hinako is shocked by how much he's improved, and Shizune gives him a pass, so he asks Hinako to let him join her in every meal moving forward. Hinako agrees, but he tells him to drop the manners and be chill, so Shizune explains that he doesn't have to maintain etiquette at all times, except for when Kagen joins them for dinner. The next day, Itsuki notices that Mirai is spacing out during their tutoring session, so he asks her what's wrong, but she assures him that she's okay. She then informs him that he scored 98 in his most recent test, so Itsuki promises to do better next time. As for his etiquette lessons, Mirai decides to conclude instructions on table manners with Itsuki because her dad approved of his performance the other day. During their break, Itsuki sees Narika patrolling the yard, and she explains that she's advertising her father's company's sports products to the school. Itsuki informs her that he's having private lessons with Mirai, but this confuses her since their exams are already over, so he reminds her that there's another upcoming exam to prepare for. As he tries to leave, Narika stops him and gaslights him into inviting her to join the tea party he and Mirai are hosting for their next etiquette class. At the tea table, Itsuki tells Narika about how he spent the night at Mirai's place, so she asks why his riz is strong enough to affect nepo girls from major families. Changing the subject, Itsuki mockingly points out that Narika has nice table manners, so she scolds him while reminding him that she's the daughter of the Miyakojima family, causing Mireille to laugh. However, Itsuki asks Mireille to tell him what's bothering her, so she explains that she's feeling dazed about the marriage that's being arranged for her. Narika claims that it's the fate of girls like them, so Itsuki asks if her family are arranging marriage for her as well, but Narika says they haven't yet. Realizing that she's fumbling the bag, she immediately switches gears and explains to Itsuki that she can still marry for love, and her parents haven't arranged anything for her because they don't think she's ready. When Mireille asks Itsuki for his opinion, he admits that he doesn't know much about arranged marriages, but says he'll wish her the best if she finds what works for her. Mireille thanks both of them for listening to her yapping session, since it's been weighing on her, and they both express their desire to continue being close friends with her after her marriage. On the way home, Mireille feels salty that Itsuki didn't have more to say about her upcoming engagement, but her heart starts racing when she remembers the time they spent in the mansion together. The next day, Itsuki arrives at the school gym for etiquette class, and Mireille explains that they'll be having dance lessons to help him get familiar with social dances and improve his posture. Following her orders, Itsuki walks over to her and holds her hand in a dancing position as she shows him some steps. After a few minutes of salsa dancing, Mireille praises Itsuki for being physically gifted, so Itsuki explains that it's due to his martial arts training. Mireille admits that she enjoys martial arts as well because it strengthens the body and mind, so Itsuki glazes her for being multi-talented. When they resume their lesson, Itsuki's 2 brain cells shoot out of his head once he sees Mireille's plots through her sweaty shirt, so she scolds him and forces him to look at her. To stop his meat saber from activating, Itsuki tells Mireille about her shirt situation, making her so embarrassed that she hides herself and calls him a weirdo. After covering herself up, she has another dance session with Itsuki, and afterwards, she decides to end their lessons for the day. While resting together, Mireille explains that she won't be able to spend time with him after school anymore once she gets engaged because she'd have to devote her time to her husband, so Itsuki admits that he'll miss spending time with her. This makes her so happy that she looks away to stop him from seeing her red cheeks. Later that night, Mireille is enjoying some tea while gushing over the romantic words Itsuki told her, and she considers hiring him for a position on the Tenroji group so they can continue spending time together, but immediately dismisses the idea. Just then, her mom arrives and points out that she's noticed how happy she's been ever since she started spending time with Itsuki. Hana then asks what Itsuki means to her, so Mireille narrates all the fun experiences they've had together and says she enjoys spending time with him. Noticing that Mireille is troubled about her marriage, Hana advises her to live freely instead of carrying their family burdens, but Mireille assures her that she's okay with it. Hana then informs her that they've set up a face-to-face meeting for her arranged marriage, so she cheerfully agrees to show up. The next day, after their dance lessons, Mireille tells Itsuki that she's meeting her future husband that day, but he says he's noticed that she isn't happy about the marriage. However, Mireille explains that the marriage is necessary for her position in the Tenroji family, because she's actually adopted, and she feels that it's her duty to work harder to progress their family. Itsuki can relate to this, because he's also determined to protect the Konohana family name, so he tells Mireille a secret. During dinner that evening, Itsuki asks Hinako how she feels about her duties as Konohana family heir, so she admits that she hates studying, but says she feels that it's better to work hard for her family. However, she reveals that she was happy when Itsuki arrived, because it helped her realize that there's more to her world than her family. That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to watch the next part.